This is the TSG Multimedia podcast for January of 2020. We're sponsored in part this month by Podomatic and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, John Abaticola. In this program, I plan to talk a bit about what happened in 2019 and also some of the plans for 2020. Before I get to all that, though, I want to talk a little bit about TSG Multimedia on Patreon. I know that some of the people watching are new to the channel and they don't know what Patreon is and why I talk about it so much. So I wanted to share how I use it. Patreon is a website that allows artists of all kinds to establish a place where the people who appreciate their work can contribute in some way to ensure that the work can continue. After considering it for months, I decided it was the right thing to do, and I started my own Patreon page in September of 2018. My thought has always been that even if a small percentage of the thousands of subscribers here on YouTube chipped in a small amount, it would add up to enough so that I can continue to bring the content that you enjoy to the channel here. To make it more attractive, I've also included rewards for those who contribute. You may have noticed at the end of every podcast, there's a list in the credits, just like the one on screen now. That's all the train crew members who are actively contributing. Anyone who contributes at any level is recognized on this list. Others who contribute more get things like TSG Train Crew mugs or t-shirts and also DVDs. The idea here is that you get something in addition to knowing that you're helping me promote some really great pastimes, model railroading first and foremost, but also historic preservation and prototypical rail fanning as well. Anyway, about halfway through last year, I decided that when Patreon generates enough to pay for the expenses of running this channel, I'd also turn off the ads that YouTube places on the videos. Those ads generate a modest amount of income that gets paid to me monthly. It's nowhere near enough to keep things going, but when combined with the Patreon funding, it's starting to get close to reaching a level that makes a difference. So that's the reason. Every little bit helps, and that's why I ask. It's not free to do this, and I'm not independently wealthy or a lottery winner. I'm just a hardworking person like you who's trying to make it and do something that I enjoy doing. There really are a lot of other ways to ensure the channel continues to provide the quality programs you enjoy that don't cost anything. For example, every time you share a video on social media, that helps. Every time you watch a playlist while you're working on your own models, or when you watch on your phone while you're riding the train to work, for example, that also helps. Every time someone tells a friend about the channel and they start watching, that also helps. All these things help, and I think you get the idea. I really appreciate your support and need it, and that's why I refer to you as the best viewers on YouTube, because the support's been outstanding all these years. 2019, like 2018, was the busiest year up to that point, with more miles traveled, more events covered, more trains seen, layouts documented, and new friends made. I compiled a list of stuff we did last year for this podcast, and to be honest, I was really surprised at how much it was. I visited dozens of layouts, many of which have been documented for programs, layout tour programs right here, that they've either been released already or they're in the program schedule for this year. I attended a similar number of events in several different states, including 150th anniversary celebrations, model railroading meets and conventions, historical society seminars, and another one this past October about youth in model railroading. I interviewed probably half a dozen people for the podcast, visited a bunch of museums, introduced some new guest celebrities who hadn't appeared on the channel before, and also had other guests back for more shows, Met hundreds, if not maybe even over 1,000 people, many of whom have become friends. In the doing something new category, because I always talk about doing something different, there were videos about events like the Special Interest Group Meet that happened last January and the Sierra Seminar in April, right? In addition to this, the TSG Live Crew Lounge series was launched in September. That's the discussion panel program that we stream that live so that you can ask knowledgeable people questions in real time. There was a visit to the Hillcrest Tree Farm in Reedley early in the year, as well as several trips to Roaring Camp and Santa Cruz to the Fern Creek and Western Garden Railroad throughout the year. The NMRA National Convention and Train Show was a new experience, and the video that came out from that event was actually one of my favorites of the year, and I'm still very proud of that one. I think it might be the best video of the year. I'd have to go back and look at everything I did again to make that decision, but I really liked that one a lot. We documented several events put on by the Pacific Locomotive Association, spanning the entire summer, including the Articulated Steam Doubleheader and the reintroduction of Southern Pacific 9010. That's the Krauss-Maffei. Sierra number 28 was reintroduced at Railtown 1897, and they ran it double-headed with number 3. That's just a few of the things that were covered. Some of the videos about these events haven't even come out yet, because there were more events covered last year than there were weekends in the year. Another hugely successful endeavor was the re-release of a bunch of layout tours for the Layout Tour Remastered series. Since their original release dates, the channel had more than doubled in size, so most of the subscribers had not seen those layout tours. Speaking of the channel doubling in size, we hit 30,000 subscribers late in November. That's more than double where we were less than 2 years ago when the channel got its new direction. So I also shared more new products in the Product Spotlight and N-Scale Friday programs than I did in 2018. Wasn't really going to talk about 2019 in review until I was putting together the massive train compilation that came out on December 25th. The process of piecing that video together reminded me that 2019 was a huge year for all things train related, and for the channel as well. I'm working on a massive model train compilation as well, and that's probably going to end up being split up into several hour-long episodes for 2020. I'm not kidding. The raw footage I pulled from my 2019 archive for that project alone is more than 9 hours long, with something like 420 clips or something like that. That's not even all the clips I took last year. It's probably about half maybe. The shots are from layout tours, operating sessions, and open houses throughout 2019. The sheer amount of video footage I took last year is overwhelming. The 2019 archive drive is 4 terabytes, and the raw footage alone is about 3 terabytes. And I'm working on editing programs that stem from last year's events still for 2020. I'm also working on standalone podcast interviews that'll come out later this year. That's where I'm taking just the interview segments out of podcasts and publishing them as their own separate releases. A lot of these interviews took place prior to last year, so they'll be new to most of the viewers. But more importantly, they'll be searchable by name or topic. For example, I interviewed Ed Dickens from the Union Pacific Steam program last summer. And even though I've added the phrase Ed Dickens interview to the title of that podcast, I think most viewers would appreciate being able to find it without having to sift through the rest of the podcast, which admittedly by now has a lot of dated information. All right, so moving on to what's happened in the past month. It was a little less busy than the rest of the year, but still managed to keep me on my toes. On the 7th, we went back to Napa to finish up a layout tour that got cut short due to a power outage. I think I mentioned that on the podcast last month. And then that evening, the SPCRR at Ardenwood was nice enough to invite us to their annual holiday banquet. After people ate, Jack Burgess made a presentation about some new media of the YV that he had discovered. Amazingly, someone had some really good film footage of the logging inclines in action that we were previously unaware of. That was pretty cool to see. The next day, I worked with Jack on the most recent episode of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. That's the episode that came out last week. And it was all about his maintenance of Way Train. If you haven't watched it yet, you gotta see that one. He shows all the MOW equipment that he's built so far and shared his current project, which is a crane on a car, right, that he's scratch building with brass and 3D printed parts. His process is so methodical and thorough that even if you're not trying to build something like that, you can still learn a lot of interesting things about what he does to make such magnificent scale models. I think Jack is the most hardcore builder you could hope to meet, and we're really lucky that he's willing to share his knowledge with us here on the channel. This series alone, I think, makes supporting the channel on Patreon worthwhile, because he shares all kinds of really cool stuff. On December 15th, we had our next TSG Crew Lounge program, the live ones that I talked about a minute ago. I was hesitant about scheduling one during the holiday season, figuring that it might be hard to get people to take the time out of a very busy time of year. So I decided months prior to try using an open topic format, figuring if people knew they could talk about anything instead of being given a specific topic, that they might be more likely to come. And it turned out to be a really great program that covered topics from youth in the hobby, or encouraging youth in the hobby, to toy trains and even modeling with unusual materials. I'm talking about my friend Gary, whose miniature paper trains from when he was a kid I thought really stole the show. I thought the program demonstrated a lot of great examples of how an expensive hobby can be enjoyed inexpensively, because you can buy American Flyer trains, for example, on the toy train subject. You can buy them inexpensively, and they're easy to work on, so you can get them running even if they haven't run in years. Or you could even cut cardstock and make prototypically accurate models of trains that way. The point here is there are 1,000 ways to enjoy the hobby, and all it takes is some creativity to find one that you enjoy. So on December 23rd, we headed out to Santa Cruz to meet up with friends Kevin and Eric to check out the toy train display at the Museum of Art and History there. Eric owns the house where the Fern Creek and Western Garden Railroad is, and he also organizes the toy train display at Museum of Art and History. That it occupies the main entrance of the museum in Santa Cruz there during the holidays. It's a great exhibit with a bunch of different scale trains that children of all ages are allowed to run. I did a short segment about this on the January 2019 podcast. After we were done at the museum, Eric went home to his newly adopted best friend, Dusty, the railroad dog. And Kevin and Sydney and I met with Paul, Trevor, and Trevor's parents for what seems to be a tradition in the making, foaming the holiday lights train, put on by Roaring Camp. After dinner and some foam from the balcony of the restaurant that we ate at, some of us rode the train. Our friend Charlie was the conductor on the train that night. You might remember Charlie from the Fern Creek and Western live steam-up video that came out last year. He's a hell of a live steam modeler and happens to work at Roaring Camp too. The last notable event in December was on Saturday the 28th. My friend Mike Cohen, who's been on the Crew Lounge shows twice now, told me at the last one that he's moving to Reno. So that means he's going to dismantle his Western Pacific Oregon Division layout. That was one of the first ever layouts that I covered on a layout tour program here on the channel almost 4 years ago. Some changes had been made since then, and we both agreed that we should document it in its final condition. So we went to do just that last Saturday. Before leaving the area, Mike introduced us to his friend Chuck Oraftik, who has a very nice layout depicting transition-era East Coast railroading in HO scale. This layout is about halfway built construction-wise, but that half is about 90% complete as far as the scenery goes. Chuck plans to add on to what he has, basically doubling its size by the time it's done, and it'll be even more spectacular. We agreed, though, that we should document it later this year. Chuck worked as an architect, so he was able to share very detailed drawings of the layout, what's already there, but what's going to get built. It was really cool to see how thorough someone can be with their planning. I want to thank Chuck for sharing part of the afternoon with us, and I also want to thank Mike for making the introduction. I'm really looking forward to making a video at Chuck's layout, and it's going to be really cool. Anyway, I often talk about being busy, and I always feel like I'm really busy, and looking back at the calendar really put it in perspective for me. I mean, why I felt so busy. I really was, and in a way, I hope 2020 ends up a little less hectic, and there's a good chance that it will, because I'm figuring that the 151st anniversary of the TransCon won't be quite as a thing to do as the 150th was. But I also know that it's hard for me to say no to events that I think would be great to share with you here on the channel. So, we'll see, right? We'll see what happens. Anyway, something I want to do this time around is throw a question out there to all of you. I want to know what your favorite program was from 2019. I'd go ahead and create a poll for this, but the polls on YouTube are limited to only 5 choices, and that's nowhere near enough because I did a lot more than 5 different types of programs last year. So if you have an opinion about this, put a comment in the comment section below the video. I'm very interested in hearing from you on this because I look for feedback so that I can develop programs that I think you'll enjoy. And if you have more than one favorite, just list them in order. Like what was your most favorite, followed by whatever you liked after that. As it stands, 2020 already has 2 trips in the works. And you may recall I talked about the Youth in Model Railroading seminar that was held in October last year. Well, the second meeting of that group it's really more like an organization under development, and it happens to be in April, so that's one of the trips being considered. The other, and this one probably is the most epic trip in the works right now, is the YouTube meet and greet happening in mid-May at Strasburg, Pennsylvania. This event is organized by our friend Dave. You know him as Sparky107107 here on YouTube, and also from Chasing Trains, right? Last year he came out to California. We did 2 Chasing Trains episodes. Dave started doing an annual get-together of YouTubers about 2 years ago, and he invites all of his viewers to come. I didn't think I was going to be able to go, but I'm currently in the process of working out some of the details with my friend Gary, who also has a YouTube channel here and has been on Chasing Trains a lot over the past couple of years. So if you can make it out to Strasburg, there's a good chance you'll see us there too. I'm sure I'll be updating everyone on that as new information develops, so stay tuned. Also in 2020, there are half a dozen layouts already being planned for layout tours. And like the one I mentioned a minute ago, right, Chuck Oraftik, I'm expecting to be able to release 1 layout tour each month this year, which is exactly what I want to do. So I've been thinking about squeezing in a trip to Utah to document some of the really excellent layouts that I got to see there last year, but I'm not completely sure I'll have the time or resources to do so. Adding your support on Patreon would help a lot toward getting the resources to do it. When it comes to being able to travel for programs, that does go toward travel expenses. Anyway, I'd like to encourage you to search your area for model railroad and historical preservation societies to visit and even volunteer at. If nothing else, you can find out when your local organizations are putting on events so that you can support them by attending. I know that I'll be volunteering as often as I can this year. It's a really worthwhile activity that ensures future generations will have a better understanding of where stuff came from, right? Why it's there, and how it got there. There's a lot of history being preserved everywhere. All you have to do is look for it. My friend Alvin, Shakalaka Bro, Gilbert, is visiting for a few days this month, and I'll most likely run the Chasing Trains camera while he's here. I'm planning to show him some train-related stuff that I know he'll enjoy. I'll tell you what, that's really what it's about for me. I've learned about places and organizations and events and stuff like that, and being able to share those things that I know someone will enjoy really makes me happy. Think about the channel you're watching right now. That's what it's about. I love to share stuff that you might not otherwise get to see. And I get to do that right here in a medium video, right, that I've spent years getting pretty good at. Believe me when I say no one's getting rich here, but I will say the enjoyment I get from this is very satisfying. And this was a bit of an epiphany for me just now, but that's really the motivation behind what I'm doing here, is sharing things that I know other people will enjoy. Anyway, it's time for this month's YouTube program schedule. Next Saturday, January 11th, we have the Amador County Model Railroad Museum HO Scale Layout Tour. This is a program about an organization that has a strong focus on ushering in the next generation of model railroaders. And their layout depicts local history quite well for those who visit. On the 18th, it's Chasing Trains in Colorado. This episode comes from a completely unexpected excursion with friends Alvin, Shakalaka Bro Gilbert, and Michelle Kempema. When we were in Colorado last October, I think I mentioned this on a podcast, we had a half a day available, and Michelle knows a lot of spots in and around the Denver area to see trains, so we did that. We went to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, and we also visited the Forney Museum of Transportation to see one of the few remaining big boys on static display. Well, of course, I made a Chasing Trains episode out of our adventure that day, and I think when you see the show, you'll understand why Alvin said Michelle is more legit than legit pizza. And then on the afternoon of January 25th, we have a special TSG Live Crew Lounge episode coming your way from the California State Railroad Museum. This special episode is being held as part of the Special Interest Group annual meeting, and we'll have a few participants on the panel talking about SIGs or Special Interest Groups, what they are, what their purpose is, where they came from. The Pacific Coast region SIGs were one of the first, if not the very first SIGs to start having annual meets. So that should prove to be interesting. Because we're basically dropping in on their event, I don't expect to be able to ask as many questions from our live chat window as we usually do during Crew Lounge programs, but there's still a lot of planning to be done to make sure this event goes off without a hitch too. So, it should be an adventure in any case. Some of the details are still unknown, so I will be updating you as new information becomes available. Look for that information here on YouTube in the community tab of the channel. And also, if you follow TSG Multimedia on Facebook, I'll post updates there as well. So, those are all the scheduled programs. In addition to what I've mentioned here, I also have some products on deck for product spotlights and N-Scale Friday programs, as well as 4 of the standalone podcast interviews I mentioned earlier. I'll be squeezing those in on Wednesdays, starting next Wednesday. So before I go, I want to invite you one more time to become a member of the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. If you can help out with $2 a month or more, head over to patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. You'll be treated to lots of behind-the-scenes stuff and also get your name up in lights once a month at the very least. It's not really much. $2 is about 7 cents a day. But if enough people do it, it'll add up, and it really helps a lot. You're the best viewers on YouTube. I want to wish you one more time a Happy New Year, and thank you for all your continued support. I'll see you next time.